In 1977, the Medical Research Council in London tested the function of the middle ear and the ability to hear clear tones in children with autism aged 8 to 15 years. Some had partial hearing loss, and most of them had abnormal reactions inside the ear. It would be possible to put an end to this, but the main question remained how and what exactly created the autism spectrum disorder. Due to the lack of technical means of neuroimaging, further research slowed down until the 26th year, but autism and delayed speech development did not disappear anywhere. My name is Andrei Gorkovenko. I am a neuropsychologist, a neurobiologist at the Center for the Diagnosis and Correction of Neuroway. We are engaged in research and development of correctional and diagnostic solutions in the field of delayed speech development and autism spectrum disorders in young children. Today we will find out what is the cause of developmental delay and ASD, what prevention is required, what to pay attention to first of all, how to fix everything if delayed speech development and autism are already part of our lives. According to statistics, today 1 out of 100 children has ASD symptoms and almost 7% have a delay in psychoecological development. At the same time, autism and delayed speech development do not always go hand in hand and often have different pathologies of the development of brain areas. What do we notice first of all when talking about when and when to start sounding the alarm? The child does not respond to his name. Here it is worth paying attention to his reactions to sounds and sensory perception in general. The first tests are carried out with infants. These are unconditional reflexes. For example, the search reflex. When we touch the corner of the baby's mouth, he will definitely turn his head to the stimulus. Or the Moreau reflex. There are different ways to conduct this test, for example, by clapping your hands loudly or dropping a toy next to a baby. From a sharp sound, he should spread the handles to the sides, unclench the fists, and at the same time pull out the legs. The same thing will happen if the baby is abruptly released. The reflex persists for up to 3 to 4 months. In the first years of life, every parent expects the child to start talking. But now 2 years are coming, 3 years, 4, but the problem with speech remains almost at the same level. At the same time, the behavior also does not correspond to the norm. And if in the first 2 years we were less tense, listen to different stories, how someone's child did not talk for a long time and then immediately started talking, then after 3 years we begin to sort through dozens of correction options. This is our first mistake. There is such a thing as heterochrony of development. This means the planned and consistent development of the brain, the development of its skills. When one or another correction procedure was needed, for example, at the age of 2, it could be skipped and immediately therapy begins that does not correspond to the capabilities of the child. There are a lot of examples for this. It doesn't make much sense to list them. These include methods that replace speech at a time when we need to run it on the contrary. In the modern world, there is a solution that allows you to fix everything. We will talk about this a little later, since initially we need to understand the cause and the primary source of DSD and autism. A study of the 2016 year showed that at least half of children with autism have peripheral hearing problems, and these problems are not obvious enough. For example, there is an unusual sensitivity to sounds in one ear or involuntary contractions of the muscles of the middle ear that distort sounds. Some have signs that the snail amplifies and transmits sound in different ways. The study found something else interesting. Autistic children independently distort speech if they have difficulty hearing at frequencies of about 2000 Hz, and this, by the way, is the average range for human speech. Lead researcher Carly Demopoulos, a neuropsychologist at the University of California, San Francisco, explains that for these children, incoming speech sounds may be altered in some way, which hinders their ability to understand and reproduce these sounds. Any distortion or inability to hear your own voice can also at least make it difficult to learn clear speech. According to other studies, difficulties with processing information in autism may be manifested by hypersensitivity to noise or inability to distinguish sounds. For example, When a lot of people gather around us in a cafe, unlike most people with autism, we can follow one conversation, we can hear it. Our brain drowns out extraneous laughter or, say, the clink of cutlery in the background. Neuropsychologist Helen Tager-Flusberg from Boston University supported this study, saying that the brain of an ordinary person is able to focus on the appropriate stream of sounds that he is trying to interpret, but for most children with autism it is very difficult. And this difficulty contributes to problems with the appearance of speech. In addition, in the 21st century, a dozen successful studies were conducted that allow us to say with confidence that autism and a defect in auditory processing of information go hand in hand and cannot exist separately. You can get acquainted with each study on the website of the research.neuroway.org. Well, since we know that autism is associated with hearing, but our child is definitely not deaf, how then are children with hearing loss, and what does the delay in speech development have to do with it? And in order to see these facets, we will have to look at how our auditory system works. Without proper hearing, there is no proper speech, so hearing must be fully operational. I will try not to delve into neuroscience and explain everything in simple language. I hope it works out. So, there is an outer, middle, and inner ear. In the inner ear, the entire acoustic sound signal is converted into an electric signal using the cochlea's hair receptors. Next, the auditory nerve transmits a sound pulse to the midbrain and thalamus. The midbrain picks up all new unknown, roughly speaking, abnormal sounds, and the thalamus filters all surrounding sounds and transmits them to the cerebral cortex. If it is a speech sound, then the Wernicke zone decodes it so that the child understands the speech. Next, the marriage zone is launched, which allows you to repeat what was once deciphered and remembered by the Wernicke zone. Thus, the developed marriage zone triggers independent speech. This whole process is called the auditory speech neural pathway, or ASNP. If a child has conductive hearing loss, that is, the middle ear does not work, or sensorineural hearing loss to the auditory nerve, then here we get deafness. In this case, the child's behavior remains normotypical or close to it, and the child can learn sign language without ZPR or autism. But if everything is fine with the middle ear and cochlea, and the midbrain and thalamus have defects, then the autism spectrum disorder will not take long to wait, since the correct filtering of sounds is not performed, behavior changes, which is completely similar to the behavior of a child with autism. Also, in addition to hearing speech defect, there are often visual processing disorders, lateral or rectilinear vision, and sensory integration disorders. All of them are localized exclusively in the thalamus. From these three defects follow all the others, which cannot exist without these three. Therefore, autism is not a disease as such and not even a feature. Autism is a consequence of a defect in the functioning of the thalamic nuclei of the brain. Well, if the midbrain and thalamus are in working condition, but there is a defect in the large hemispheres, in particular in the areas of Wernicke and marriage, then we have a delay in psychoecological development without autism. How to understand which specific area is not developed in a child? To do this, a specialist in psychological and biological neurodiagnostics conducts a full screening. It also includes a conclusion from an ENT and a sign language specialist with mandatory objective diagnosis of hearing on an otoacoustic emission. By the way, according to the law, it should be carried out in the maternity hospital. This is called the TOAE and DPOAE test. For us, parents, it is only important to know whether there is conductive hearing loss and whether the cochlea's hair receptors are in working condition. We come to the surdologist and check. And everything that concerns the midbrain, thalamus, and large hemispheres, we can adjust ourselves at home or with the help of a specialist. How to correct the defects of these parts of the brain, we will talk later, but now I would like to tell you about the causes of these defects and how to protect your child from the development of DSD and ASD. What could affect the rollback in the development and appearance of autism spectrum disorders? The first is birth trauma, hypoxia of the brain. Due to lack of oxygen, brain cells die in the lower areas, which include the midbrain and thalamus, are the first to be affected. In this case, unfortunately, we could not initially know that such a thing could happen. But on the other hand, it gives more time for the neurons of the lower sections to recover. The second is infections and autoimmune diseases that lead to inflammation of the soft areas of the brain and disruption of its work. The third is taking antibiotics with cytotoxic effect. There are more than a dozen names of such. But not all antibiotics are dangerous. You should avoid those whose names end with CIN. For example, gentamicin, azithromycin, neomycin, and so on. Any inflammation of the brain can lead to disruption of the auditory speech neural pathway. Therefore, as soon as we see that the child has stopped responding clearly to his name or other speech, more days of incorrigible rollback begin. It is necessary to take measures immediately. Why can a rollback be incorrigible? Each part of our body retains its structure, since the correct DNA code creates the classical physiological development of a person in the womb and does not change it throughout life. 2 arms, 2 legs, eyes, ears, hair, and so on. During our lifetime, we cannot grow additional limbs, but the process of organ formation does not stop even after birth, and our brain creates a new structure depending on age and preserves it for later life. If we talk about autism, then by the age of 5 or 6, the thalamus is considered fully developed by the body. That is, until the age of 5 or 6, it is still developing, and by this age it is already completing its physiological formation. And then the brain proceeds to the intensive formation of the large hemispheres with such a thalamus, which is. Accordingly, if there was an thalamus defect and it was not corrected in any way, then the further development and complete correction of autism after 5 or 6 years will be very difficult. Therefore, the earlier the correction begins, the faster the child will have speech and correct his behavioral characteristics. I have been talking about sound therapy for a long time because it is the most effective therapy that allows you to restore the process of brain development and its auditory speech functions. Since we understand that delayed speech development and altered autism-like behavior is associated with a defect in the development of ASNP from the middle ear, thalamus, and large hemispheres, we need to apply targeted corrective procedures to these areas. And today, it is possible to influence all these zones only with the help of the sound therapy method. Perhaps some have already heard about the Tomasoft method, but some specialists and centers apply the wrong instructions to the method. For example, one of the common mistakes is the child sleep during the procedure. The child should not sleep while therapy is going on, because in sleep the brain turns off most of the areas that we need to influence. The large hemispheres structure the neural network in a dream, stores long-term information that was received in the waking mode and does not accept new signals for preservation. Also, the thalamus closes acoustic access to the large hemispheres and filters out a huge stream of sounds, and we need a full impact on all frequencies. If we talk about acoustic frequencies, then on average a person can hear sound in the range from 20 to 20,000 Hz. Absolutely any closed-type headphones that cover this frequency range can be used to perform sound therapy. Headphones with bone conduction are not needed for this if the child does not suffer from conductive hearing loss, since bone conduction is only needed to bypass the non-working middle ear. Therefore, if the child is doing well with hearing, we use ordinary closed-type headphones, wired or wireless, it makes no difference. The main advantage of sound therapy is that it can be done at home without any expensive equipment. In the 2015 year, we developed a sound therapy system for Tomasoft, which for 2 years passed closed tests, and in the 2017 year it became available to all users of the CIS countries and Europe. Today we have a huge number of users who develop children by the sound therapy method on the Tomasoft program. The system allows the child to learn to hear and understand the world around him correctly. Thus, there is a launch of independent speech during the course of correction courses. According to a recent study of ASDS2, more than 87% of children with a previously diagnosed ASD and DSD, who were eventually able to speak, previously took audio correction courses in correctional centers or at home on various devices using the Tomasoft method. Their hearing and speech skills were restored to the maximum by the age of 5 or 6. All we need to get started with the sound therapy system is a Windows-based computer or laptop and any closed-type headphones that support the entire spectrum of necessary frequencies. One of the advantages of the program is an unlimited number of audio correction sessions and courses, the ability to use it at home in a correctional center, the ability to receive the latest updates regularly and for free, and have access to all the functions of the program. And now let's put on headphones and start the session to listen to how regular alternation of frequencies and channels of therapy can restore auditory perception. If you have headphones, put them on. Here you can create an individual card, but for now we will just run a test session on the general course. The program is also available in English. Thus, hearing is restored at all important frequencies, from low to high, using both channels. Tomasoft has a fully automated interface that will not allow mistakes during correction. The program is easy to use, and the most important thing is an affordable price. All 3 courses on Tomasoft come out cheaper than one course of correction in the center using the Tomasoft method. And the effectiveness, as practice shows, and long-term observations of our patients are much higher. Sound therapy, like other developments of the Neuroway Center, is highly effective in correcting autism spectrum disorders. You can find more detailed information about research or correctional systems at the links below. And our hotline is open around the clock for your questions. I would also like to say that we have a full course of training in psychological and biological neurodiagnostics for specialists of correctional centers. If you are a speech therapist, speech pathologist, neuropsychologist, or other correctional teacher, then this course will be extremely useful for you. And that's all I have for this hour. Good luck with your therapy and rapid development.